On the morning of December 16th, 2000, 31-year-old Jerry Michael Mike Williams left his home in Tallahassee, Florida, before dawn. Known to friends and family as a skilled outdoorsman, he was headed for a duck hunting trip at Lake Seminole near the Georgia state line. Before leaving, he assured his wife, Denise, that he would return by noon so they could celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary. Confident in his abilities and familiar with the area, Mike had every reason to expect an ordinary morning on the water. When noon came and went without his return, Denise began making phone calls to friends and family members, searching for any sign of him. Concern grew quickly. Within hours, word had spread that Mike had failed to come home. A search effort was organized, drawing in local law enforcement, volunteers, and members of the community. Among those assisting were Brian Winchester, Mike's longtime best friends in high school, and Brian's father. Search teams located Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the lake. His small boat was also recovered from the water. However, there was no sign of Mike himself. The circumstances were puzzling. The weather had been cold but clear, and Mike was known to be cautious during outdoor activities. Despite intensive efforts over several days, including water searches and shoreline sweeps, no trace of his body was found. For 44 days, the search continued without results. Frustration grew as each lead ended in disappointment. Then, 6 months after Mike's disappearance, a discovery reignited speculation. Investigators recovered his waders, a camouflage hunting jacket, his hunting license, and a flashlight from the waters of Lake Seminole. To some, this reinforced the theory that Mike had suffered a boating accident, fallen into the lake, and drowned. Given the lake's reputation for alligators, it was suggested that his body may have been consumed by them. However, others found the details troubling. Alligators were far less active in colder winter months, and the timing and condition of the recovered items raised quiet questions. Despite this, with no body and no clear evidence of foul play, authorities concluded their investigation, and Mike was declared legally dead. One person, however, could not accept the official explanation. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, felt from the beginning that something was deeply wrong. Her instincts told her the circumstances did not add up. Although her doubts were not yet part of the formal investigation, they marked the start of what would become a relentless, years-long fight to uncover the truth. At the time, though, the disappearance of Mike Williams remained officially recorded as a tragic hunting accident. With the case closed and the community left to wonder how such an experienced outdoorsman could vanish without a trace on a familiar lake. From the moment authorities concluded that Mike Williams had drowned and likely been eaten by alligators, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to believe it. To her, the story never made sense. Mike was a skilled outdoorsman, familiar with the hazards of Lake Seminole, and the conditions on the day he vanished did not align with what investigators claimed. Cheryl's instincts told her there was more to the story, and she resolved to prove it. She began by collecting every detail she could find. Over time, she compiled 27 pages of handwritten notes, carefully documenting inconsistencies, timelines, and observations. Cheryl also took her fight to the highest office in the state. For 9 years, she wrote a letter every single day to the governor of Florida. By the end of that effort, she had sent 1,472 letters, each one a plea to reopen the case and look deeper into her son's disappearance. Her determination was fueled by facts she uncovered through her own research. One critical piece of information stood out. Alligators do not feed during cold winter months. This directly challenged the theory that Mike's body had been consumed after drowning. The timing of the discovery of his hunting gear, 6 months after he disappeared, also struck her as suspicious. Then there were the financial details. After Mike was declared legally dead, Denise Williams collected $1.75 million from 3 separate life insurance policies. One of those policies, worth $1 million, had been written by Brian Winchester, Mike's longtime best friend, just months before the disappearance. For Cheryl, this connection was impossible to ignore. As years passed, suspicion in the community began to grow, particularly after Denise Williams married Brian Winchester in 2005, 5 years after Mike's disappearance. While some still accepted the official version of events, others began to share Cheryl's belief that the case was far from a tragic accident. Despite repeated setbacks and official resistance, Cheryl never wavered. She attended every meeting, spoke to every reporter who would listen, and continued pressing law enforcement to revisit the evidence. Her relentless pursuit was not driven by speculation, but by documented facts, inconsistencies, and a deep conviction that justice had not been served. Although at this stage the case remained closed, Cheryl's persistence laid the foundation for the truth to emerge years later. Her refusal to accept easy answers kept the memory of her son alive in the public eye and ensured that the questions surrounding his disappearance would never be entirely forgotten. Mike Williams and Denise Merrill first met in high school at North Florida Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida. It was there that they also became close friends with Brian Winchester and his future wife, Kathy Thomas. The four of them formed part of the same social circle, developing relationships that would eventually lead to two sets of high school sweethearts, Mike with Denise and Brian with Kathy. Over the years, the couples remained intertwined through friendship, community, and shared history. By the mid-1990s, both couples were married. Mike and Denise wed in 1994 and soon welcomed their daughter, Ansley. Brian and Kathy also built a life together. On the surface, their friendships appeared stable and genuine. Beneath that surface, however, a hidden relationship was beginning to take shape, one that would eventually destroy all of their lives. According to Brian Winchester's later testimony, the affair between him and Denise began on October 13, 1997, during a night out in Tallahassee. The couples attended a concert by the band Sister Hazel. After arriving, Mike and Kathy left to park the car while Brian and Denise entered the club. In that brief time, they shared their first kiss. That same night, they returned to their separate homes but spoke for hours on the phone, engaging in intimate conversation and phone sex. From that point, their relationship escalated quickly. Whenever Mike was at work, traveling for conferences, or otherwise away, Brian and Denise met in secret. They also found ways to see each other during group activities, concealing their intentions under the guise of friendship. On occasion, they traveled together, with Brian joining Mike and Denise on trips, using the opportunity to spend time alone with her. Kathy Winchester would later reveal that not long before Mike's disappearance, she, Brian, and Denise were involved in a sexual encounter. This revelation underscored the depth of betrayal within their marriages and hinted at the complicated dynamics between the four individuals. Over time, Brian and Denise began discussing how they could be together permanently. Divorce, however, was not an option for Denise. She cited her religious beliefs and an unwillingness to share custody of her daughter with Mike as the main reasons. According to Brian's confession, Denise's position was firm. There was only one solution for them to be together. That solution was Mike's death. Their conversations moved from abstract possibilities to concrete plans. Ideas were discussed, including staged accidents, but the focus remained on ensuring that Mike would not survive. These discussions laid the groundwork for a murder plot that, in their minds, would solve their personal problems and secure their future together. By late 2000, the plan had taken shape. Within weeks, it would be set into motion on the waters of Lake Seminole. On the morning of December 16, 2000, Brian Winchester and Mike Williams set out for what was supposed to be a friendly duck hunting trip. The plan, as Brian later confessed, had been carefully crafted in the weeks before. He had told Mike about a secret special spot at Lake Seminole where the hunting was supposedly better. This pretense would lure Mike into an isolated area where Brian could carry out the killing without witnesses. They launched a small aluminum boat in the early hours, the winter air sharp and cold. Mike wore heavy duck hunting gear, a thick jacket, chest waders, and boots. The clothing was meant to protect against the cold water, but Brian knew it could also become deadly if Mike ended up overboard. Once on the lake, Brian steered toward a secluded area away from other hunters. He invited Mike to stand so he could point out the location. As soon as Mike was on his feet, Brian shoved him overboard. His expectation was that the weight of the waterlogged waders and jacket would drag Mike under before he could react. However, the plan did not go as smoothly as Brian anticipated. Mike managed the surface and grabbed onto a partially submerged tree stump, fighting to keep himself above water. At that moment, Brian retrieved a 12-gauge shotgun from the boat and fired at Mike, striking him in the face. Denise Williams was not present at the scene, but Brian later stated during his testimony that she was in my head behind me, implying her influence and involvement in the decision to kill Mike. After the shooting, Brian pulled Mike's body from the water and placed it in his vehicle. He covered the body with a tarp and drove nearly 60 miles to Carr Lake, a remote location far from the initial scene. There, he dug a shallow grave and buried Mike. The entire operation was conducted with calculated precision to prevent discovery. In the hours that followed, Brian returned to Tallahassee and joined the search effort for Mike, portray himself as a concerned friend. He even spoke with authorities, maintaining the appearance of someone eager to find answers. Months later, investigators came to believe that Brian returned to Lake Seminole and planted Mike's hunting gear, waders, a jacket, and his license, to reinforce the idea of an accidental drowning. This, they suspected, was part of a broader plan to help Denise collect on Mike's life insurance policies, totaling $1.75 million. For more than 16 years, the truth about that morning remained hidden. Brian's confession would not come until 2017, finally revealing the cold and deliberate actions that had taken place on that frigid December day. In the years following Mike Williams' disappearance, Denise Williams and Brian Winchester continued the life they had envisioned together. Brian divorced his wife, Kathy Winchester, and in 2005, he married Denise. To outsiders, it appeared the couple had finally achieved what they wanted. But beneath the surface, their marriage was far from stable. From the beginning, both lived under a cloud of paranoia. They feared being watched or overheard, knowing the circumstances of Mike's disappearance could one day draw attention. This constant anxiety strained their relationship. Brian's admitted sex addiction created further tension, eroding trust and intimacy. In 2010, a significant development unsettled them even more. Authorities reclassified Mike's disappearance from a presumed accidental drowning to a suspicious death. This change signaled increased scrutiny, and for the couple, it meant the past they had worked so hard to conceal was now under renewed investigation. By 2012, their marriage had unraveled to the point of separation. Denise and Brian began living apart, though their connection, forged in secrecy and crime, still bound them in complex ways. In 2015, Denise took the decisive step of filing for divorce, a move that Brian resisted. Brian's desperation to prevent the end of their marriage culminated in a dangerous confrontation in August 2016. Early one morning, he concealed himself in the back seat of Denise's SUV, armed with a handgun. When she entered the vehicle, Brian emerged, held her at gunpoint, and threatened to kill himself. He also implied violence toward her if she refused to reconcile. Denise managed to stay calm during the ordeal. She spoke to him in a way that de-escalated the immediate threat, convincing him to allow her to leave safely. Once free, she contacted law enforcement. Brian was arrested and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. This incident marked a turning point. For investigators, it was more than a domestic violence case. It provided the leverage they needed. Brian's arrest set in motion the events that would eventually lead to his full confession about Mike Williams' murder. The marriage that began in secrecy and conspiracy ended in public scandal, exposing fractures that had been present from the very start. Brian Winchester's 2016 arrest for kidnapping Denise Williams became the critical break investigators had been waiting for. For years, law enforcement had harbored suspicions about both Brian and Denise. The fact that Brian had married Mike Williams' widow, combined with his involvement in Mike's life insurance policy, had always seemed too convenient to ignore. Now, with Brian in custody facing serious charges, detectives saw an opportunity to pressure him for the truth. Investigators approached both Brian and Denise for interviews. Denise, consistent with her past behavior, refused to cooperate. She maintained her silence, offering no explanation and no statement. Brian, on the other hand, recognized the gravity of his legal situation, facing the possibility of decades in prison for the kidnapping and potential murder charges if new evidence surfaced. He agreed to talk. In a negotiated deal, Brian was offered immunity from prosecution for Mike Williams' murder if he fully cooperated. The arrangement was clear. In exchange for telling investigators everything about the events of December 16, 2000, and revealing the location of Mike's remains, he would not face a murder trial. Before being sentenced to 20 years in prison for the kidnapping, Brian led authorities to a remote site at Carr Lake, nearly 60 miles from where Mike was last seen. There, in painstaking detail, he recounted how he had lured Mike under the pretense of a duck hunting trip, pushed him into the water, and ultimately shot him. The recovery of Mike's body ended a 17-year search and provided the physical evidence needed to move forward with the prosecution. With Brian's confession in hand, attention turned to Denise. In May 2018, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after fact. The arrest shocked many in the Tallahassee community, where Denise had maintained a quiet public life. Despite the mounting evidence, Denise pleaded not guilty and insisted on her innocence. The trial in December 2018 was a high-profile event, drawing widespread media coverage. Brian Winchester took the stand, delivering testimony that was both detailed and damaging. He described a years-long affair with Denise, their plotting of Mike's murder, and their life together afterward. The jury deliberated for just over 8 hours before returning a verdict. Denise Williams was found guilty on all counts. Outside the courtroom, Denise's daughter publicly defended her mother, expressing unwavering belief in her innocence. Nevertheless, the court upheld the verdict, and Denise faced a life sentence for her role in the crime. The confession had not only closed a cold case, but also revealed a tangled web of deceit, greed, and betrayal that had been hidden for nearly 2 decades. For Cheryl Williams, the conclusion of the case was both heartbreaking and deeply validating. Nearly 17 years had passed since the December morning when her son, Mike Williams, vanished during what was believed to be a simple duck hunting trip. Over those years, Cheryl had endured official skepticism, dead ends, and repeated refusals from authorities to reclassify Mike's disappearance as anything other than a tragic accident. Yet, she never stopped pushing. She wrote letters, met with investigators, and kept her son's name alive in the public eye. When Brian Winchester's confession finally brought the truth to light, Cheryl's worst fears were confirmed. The reality that her only son had been murdered in a deliberate, premeditated plot was devastating. But along with the pain came a sense of justice. In 2018, when Denise Williams was convicted on all charges, Cheryl was present in court, witnessing the final moment of a fight she had carried almost entirely on her own. The legal battle did not end there. In 2020, an appellate court overturned Denise's murder conviction, leaving only the conspiracy charge in place. Despite this partial reversal, Cheryl focused on the larger victory. The truth had been revealed, and those responsible had faced the law. In 2021, speaking to the media, Cheryl said, "Michael has justice." She explained that knowing the fact of what happened, and seeing both Brian and Denise held accountable, gave her some measure of peace. "I believe he can rest now," she added, a quiet acknowledgement of the long, exhausting journey. The case left an enduring mark, not only on Cheryl's life, but on the broader Tallahassee community. It exposed the calculated murder committed by the 2 people Mike trusted most, his wife and his best friend. It revealed how greed, secrecy, and betrayal could destroy lives and remain hidden for years. And it proved the value of persistence in solving even the coldest of cases. For Cheryl Williams, justice did not mean erasing the grief or undoing the years of loss. It meant that her son's story had been told in full, and the truth could no longer be buried. Her determination stands as a testament to how one person's refusal to give up can bring even the most hidden crimes into the light.